Hello, everyone. Today marks the first day of the fourth plenary session. As per tradition, the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, officially published an editorial in Xinhua News Agency to set the tone, followed by entering a closed-door session. However, this does not mean there is no news today. On the contrary, there are not only updates, but two significant exclusive pieces of information. One comes from my own high-level sources within the regime, and the other from Mr. Yao Cheng, a former naval officer. Both reveal shocking insider details involving Xi Jinping, his family members, and, of course, the potential complete list of the next Central Military Commission, CMC members. Before diving into these revelations, I must remind everyone that, while I have absolute confidence in the reliability of my exclusive sources, these should still be taken as reference only. Within the regime, different levels and departments have their own information barriers, and much of the information may be partial or delayed. Given the current volatile political climate, where intrigue and power struggles abound, the situation can change rapidly, and the final outcome may deviate significantly. Objectively speaking, however, this is one of the few channels available to us to gain insight into the black box politics of the fourth plenary session. Today's Xinhua editorial highly praised Xi Jinping, featuring the key phrase, "One blueprint carried through to the end, one generation after another continuing the work." Does this imply that Xi Jinping will continue to hold power and roll up his sleeves to keep working? It is October 20th, Eastern Time, and I am Tang Jingyuan. Welcome to subscribe to our channel, where we use an objective perspective, logic, and common sense to uncover the truth behind the news. Without further ado, let me first share the exclusive information I obtained from high-level sources within the regime. I've summarized the key points as follows. Xi Jinping's current status is that his freedom of movement has been restricted. Who is restricting him and which department is enforcing this were not specified by the source. My personal speculation is that it is either personnel from the Ministry of Public Security or directly from the military. Given the unprecedented case of 9 senior generals being implicated in a power seizure, I believe the latter is more likely. The anti-Xi faction's current approach to handling Xi Jinping involves two options. If she cooperates, they will adopt a Hua Guofeng model, where both sides save face, allowing Xi to step down gracefully. If she does not cooperate, it will be a sword drawn, entering the imperial palace model, essentially a forceful resolution on the spot. The source did not elaborate further on whether the Hua Guofeng model means she must voluntarily resign during the fourth plenary session. As we all know, the turning point for Hua Guofeng's downfall became clear during the fifth plenary session of the 11th Central Committee from February 23rd to 29th, 1980. During that session, 5 key allies considered Hua's right-hand men, Wang Dongxing, Ji Dingkue, Wu De, Chen Shilian, and Chen Yonggui, resigned, marking the public marginalization of Hua and the countdown to his exit. Then, in June 1981, at the 6th plenary session of the 11th Central Committee, Hua Guofeng formally resigned as chairman of the CCP Central Committee and chairman of the CMC, stepping down through a bloodless coup. Thus, if she fully cooperates with the Hua Guofeng model, he might retain his 3 major titles after this fourth plenary session, acting as a figurehead while his actual power is stripped away. The Politburo, including the Standing Committee, may undergo a significant reshuffle, with prominent anti-Xi faction figures entering the fold. In other words, I believe Xi's loss of power may become public during this fourth plenary session, but this does not necessarily mean all his titles will be immediately removed. These are two separate matters. He might lose them, or they might be retained. We discussed this in detail yesterday, so I won't repeat it here. New viewers can refer to our program from yesterday. The source mentioned a critical power institution in Xi Jinping's system, the National Security Commission, NSC, which he personally established. It is said that Xi handed over actual control of the NSC to his sister, Xi Qiaoqiao, known externally as Qi Qiaoqiao, and her family long ago. The source indicates that Xi's NSC has been effectively controlled by Xi Qiaoqiao's family behind the scenes. However, at least before September, Shi Qiaoqiao's entire family was preparing to emigrate overseas, after which the NSC's authority was transferred to Shi Yuanping. Thus, Shi Yuanping, this so-called distant prince, is not a carefree noble but holds significant real power. However, this power has also been heavily impacted. The source explicitly stated that a key indicator is the case involving Shenzhen Metro's Yanwei Group. The investigation of Shenzhen Bank's chairman, Zhang Youxia, is closely tied to the family's power background within the NSC. This is an action aimed at uprooting the Shi family's influence in Shenzhen. In previous programs, we discussed Zhang Youxia's arrest in depth. I mentioned then that Zhang Youxia is essentially a front for the Shi Qiaoqiao family. His arrest was merely a means, with the real target being the Shi family. Just 2 days after Zhang Youxia's arrest was confirmed by official media, China's first financial news publicly reported, citing multiple sources, that bank's former president and CEO, Zhu Jiuxing, has been subjected to criminal coercive measures. What does this signify? It indicates a thorough crackdown with the intent to investigate to the very end. Anyone familiar with the interconnected interests among Shenzhen Bank, Shenzhen Metro, and Shenzhen Yanwei Group will understand the significance of Zhang Youxia and Zhu Jiuxing's arrests, as they are closely linked to the truth behind Xi Jinping's power. In fact, the source also mentioned even more significant information regarding the post-Xi era, as stripping Xi of power is not merely about replacing one leader with another while everything else remains the same. It may involve far-reaching arrangements with greater repercussions. For safety reasons, I won't disclose these details publicly for now, but we may share them when the time is right. In summary, the key points from my exclusive channels boil down to one core issue. Xi Jinping faces 2 possible outcomes at the 4th plenary session, and the choice lies in his hands. Currently, not only is Xi himself under strict control, but his family's power and wealth are also under investigation. In my view, this is a standard tactic. The investigation into Xi's family is a card, a bargaining chip. If Xi fully cooperates, he could step down gracefully, and his family might be spared. But if he digs in his heels and opts for a destructive approach, the warriors storming the back gate may not only enter the imperial palace, but also the entire Xi family's domain. From other sources, such as the revelations by former military officer Yao Cheng, it seems Xi will at least lose his position as CMC chairman. Let's talk about Xi Jinping's CMC chairmanship. Last night, Yao Cheng dropped a bombshell on his self-media program, claiming to have received internal military information that the CMC will undergo a complete overhaul, with the 7-member list for the new CMC already finalized. What are the details? According to his revelations, Xi Jinping will resign as CMC chairman during the 4th plenary session, with Zhang Youxia taking over. Hu Chunhu, the former crown prince, who has recently been making frequent high-profile appearances, will assume the role of CMC vice chairman. Liu Zhenli, former chief of staff of the CMC Joint Staff Department, will be promoted to CMC vice chairman, with Hu Chunhu as the first vice chairman and Liu Zhenli as the second. The information also states that at the 21st Party Congress in 2 years, Xi Jinping and Zhang Youxia will retire simultaneously, and Hu Chunhu will take over as general secretary and CMC chairman. The main reason for this arrangement is that Hu Chunhu has never had military involvement and needs 2 years under Zhang Youxia's guidance to familiarize himself with the role of CMC vice chairman for a smooth transition. Additionally, the information reveals that Zhang Shengmin, the current CMC Discipline Inspection Commission secretary, will replace Miao Hua as director of the CMC Political Work Department, taking control of military personnel matters. The only survivor of this major purge, Air Force Commander Chang Dingxiu, will replace Liu Zhenli as Chief of Staff of the CMC Joint Staff Department. Furthermore, General Wang Renhua, the current Secretary of the Military Political and Legal Affairs Commission, will be promoted to CMC Discipline Inspection Commission Secretary, becoming a CMC member. Defense Minister Dong Jun, who has performed well in past scrutiny, will also be elevated to the CMC as a member. In total, the new CMC will consist of 7 members: Zhang Youxia, Hu Chunhu, Lu Zhenli, Zhang Shengmin, Chang Dingqiu, Wang Renhua, and Dong Jun. Among them, Zhang Youxia and Lu Zhenli are from the army, Zhang Shengmin from the rocket force, Chang Dingqiu from the air force, and Dong Jun and Wang Renhua from the navy, ensuring representation from all four major military branches and balancing various interests. While serving as CMC vice chairman, Hu Chunhu will also take on the role of state vice president, mirroring Xi Jinping's arrangement when he was designated as the successor. I'll reiterate, although these details come from military sources and have a certain degree of credibility, they are, after all, rumors within military circles and may not align perfectly with reality. They should be considered as one of many versions for reference. This revelation does not mention whether Xi Jinping's position as General Secretary will change. However, we can at least confirm one thing. If Zhang Youxia takes over as CMC chairman and Hu Chunhu becomes CMC vice chairman, it unequivocally signals the end of the Xi Jinping era. She would effectively have relinquished power, as the foundation of the CCP's political power lies in military control. The transfer of military power signifies a change of regime, placing Xi in a Hua Guofeng-like position post the 5th plenary session of the 11th Central Committee. Even if he retained some titles, everyone knows he would merely be a figurehead waiting for his formal exit at the next stage. This raises a significant question. If, according to this revelation, Xi is certain to relinquish his CMC chairmanship, can he retain his position as General Secretary? Let's consider Hu Chunhu. If he is following the model of Xi Jinping as the designated successor, he would need to join the Politburo Standing Committee and serve as the top-ranking secretary of the Central Secretariat, in addition to being state vice president and CMC vice chairman. Thus, Hu Chunhu may not need to assume the general secretary position immediately, as a designated successor would require at least a 2-year transition period. This necessitates someone to control the party and government comprehensively during this time, and the only likely candidate is Wang Yang. However, if she retains the general secretary position, Wang Yang would not be able to govern openly and would likely continue to wield power as the head of the central coordinating body. This arrangement poses several issues. Wang Yang would be unable to represent the country in major international activities or visits as the top leader, while she could still leverage the 2-year transition period to garner domestic and international support, potentially triggering another disruptive crisis. The Hua Guofeng model succeeded in a peaceful power transition because Hua was an honest man. Mao Zedong's evaluation of him as an honest man was a key reason for choosing him as successor. Xi Jinping, however, is clearly not Hua Guofeng. While he may lack governance skills, he is adept at power manipulation, notoriously untrustworthy, capricious, and possesses a red guard-like recklessness that Hua lacked. Thus, I am fairly certain that even if she agrees to follow the Hua Guofeng model now, retaining the general secretary and state president positions would inevitably lead him to stir trouble during the transition period. I have no illusions about this. Therefore, in my view, allowing Xi to relinquish only the CMC chairmanship while retaining the general secretary position is a redundant arrangement. Once he loses the CMC chairmanship, it publicly declares his loss of power. Keeping him on stage as a figurehead serves no purpose and only adds risks. Either he resigns from both positions, stepping down gracefully to retire, or he retains both, like Hua Guofeng, until the next 5th plenary session, rather than lingering in a half-in, half-out state. This brings us back to the key topic we discussed yesterday. How can Wang Yang legitimately and procedurally enter the Politburo and assume the General Secretary role, even as an acting General Secretary? Some viewers commented that holding the 21st Party Congress early poses significant practical challenges and suggested an alternative path for Wang Yang's rise, which we'll discuss in today's interactive segment. Next, let's address the Xinhua editorial specifically released for the 4th plenary session. This editorial is a standard ritual before every plenary session, typically summarizing past achievements, declaring the situation excellent, and looking forward to an even brighter future. The current focus is on 2 points. First, the editorial mentions Xi Jinping's name 9 times and refers to the core leadership of Comrade Xi Jinping 4 times, which some interpret as setting the tone for the fourth plenary session, suggesting she still holds firm control. Second, the article's closing sentence reads, "One blueprint carried through to the end, one generation after another continuing the work, striving to write a more splendid chapter in Chinese modernization." This is seen as the editorial's key phrase, hinting that she will continue to lead. How should we view these two focal points? First, a full reading of the editorial shows that all praise for Xi focuses on summarizing the 14th five-year plan, reviewing past achievements. This not only polishes Xi's image, but also upholds the CCP's narrative of greatness, which is unsurprising. It can also be seen as giving due respect to a leader about to step down. When an old leader retires, farewell speeches are filled with praise, regardless of private sentiments about the plague god finally leaving. Second, does the phrase "one blueprint carried through to the end, one generation after another continuing the work" truly mean she will continue leading? Not necessarily. Let's examine its origin. This phrase was coined by Xi Jinping himself, first appearing in a December 19, 2023, People's Daily article on Xi's reform methodology, titled "One Blueprint Carried Through to the End, One Generation After Another Continuing the Work." The article's core message is that reform is not a one-time task, but a long-term, arduous mission. It cites Xi's tenure as shaman mayor to his role as general secretary, proposing great rejuvenation as a continuous reform journey. Xi's original words were, "A good blueprint, as long as it is scientific, realistic, and aligns with the people's aspirations, must be carried forward by one generation after another." See the point? Xi's clear intent was that a good blueprint remains unchanged, and even as generations change, the work must continue without abandoning it halfway. This is not a forced interpretation. Similar articles praising Xi, published today by CCTV and Xiaoshi magazine, titled "The General Secretary Plans a New Chapter for Chinese Modernization," end with a key sentence. As the 14th five-year plan concludes and the 15th five-year plan begins, one blueprint is carried through to the end, one baton passed to the next, one generation after another continuing the work, turning the grand goal of national rejuvenation into reality through successive five-year plans. This makes it clearer. One generation after another continuing the work aligns with one baton passed to the next, meaning predecessors hand over to successors, but all strive toward the same goal. What's the difference between passing the baton and passing the leadership? None. Xinhua, however, cleverly omitted one baton passed to the next, potentially causing misinterpretation. Of course, everyone is free to interpret this key sentence as they see fit. Let's do a quick poll. Reply 1 if you think it means she will continue leading, or 2 if you think it means one generation replaces another, passing the baton to continue the work.